This is the Hard to Swallow podcast with Rosa and Rhea. And today is a special day because we have our first guest. Courtney Skippon is here.
Hello.
You might know her if you're a fan of reality TV because she was on Below Deck.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So Below Deck, like, first of all, I love that show.
Do you?
Like, I do. I really do. I think it's a great show. I mean, I'm a huge reality TV fan, so we're so grateful to have you. But do you want to just, like, talk briefly, like, just a little bit about the show and, like, what it's about?
Oh, yeah, and, like, what made you want to go on it?
Yeah.
What is it about? Well, I ask myself that all the time. I mean, it's just about yacht crew. I worked on yachts before, so it talks about the people that work on the yacht and the weird guests that come on.
And what made you want to go on the show? Like,
I don't know, truly. So I have like a few friends that are familiar with it, and that's sort of their only reference for yachting, especially in Vancouver. It's not a big thing.
Yeah.
So when I came back to Vancouver, everyone was like, "You're perfect for Below Deck. Apply for Below Deck." And then I had my friend that I worked on the only other yacht with me was visiting, and she's actually from Vancouver as well. And we were having wine one night because she was like here, and she was like, "You have to apply." So I like made a video on my iPhone with like iMovie and like just sent it in. And then I was at work the next day, and like the casting person called me.
Oh.
And I was like, "Courtney's not here. She will call you back."
No way.
But it was like a pretty quick process after that. So I just sort of like got the ball rolling, and then it was like it seemed silly to turn down the opportunity.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of how it goes. It's like you get a little idea and then the ball rolls and you're like, okay, I guess I'm doing this.
Yeah.
and so ultimately you're on this like boat, and it's pretty big, but like boats generally, even the huge ones, are small, and you're in these close quarters with all these people that you work with, your colleagues and the guests and whatnot. And so what was that like, being so like with the same people in such a small tiny space for so long?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly daunting, and you have very close, like, living quarters. Like, smaller than where we're sitting right now is, like, what my room was like with a roommate. And, like, it's just exhausting. I mean, but really you're not spending that much time there because you're working all the time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You don't really have a lot of time to eat either, so you're sort of doing that on the go. So it's almost good that you're so tired because you don't have time to realize, like, how sad you are.
Right.
Oh. Yeah. I can't imagine, like, I love my personal space and time like so much. I cannot imagine not having that for so long and just all constantly giving like catering to crazy people who are so rich.
Yeah.
And having a positive attitude, like that's gotta be
and on top of everything you're just like, everything's awesome.
Truly, it's a lot of emotional labor, and then you also have the extra labor of like living with other people and having to accommodate their needs as well. And
yeah. And so we found was it the reunion episode where, like, that was really interesting to us, how you sort of called out this guy that you had been working with. What's his name?
we don't. It doesn't matter. Who is he?
One of the other people on the boat.
And you sort of called him out because he had been kind of doing some weird behavior. You had some sort of relationship. So do you want to just like talk briefly about that? Give us a little synopsis about that relationship.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. I don't know. It's so complicated.
Yeah. Was it essentially like what we basically saw, like on if you watch the show? Like,
yeah. I mean, certainly there's more because every episode is like 450 hours of footage that you're putting into a 45-minute episode. So there's so much.
Wow.
Like you're only seeing little snippets, and it's accurate, but it's just not as like all-encompassing. So it may seem like there's less of a relationship you're only seeing a tiny bit. So it's certainly bigger than what you see.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Interesting. Cool.
I really I think this was you. You said something like, I don't really start like getting feelings for a guy until I get to know them, or like having like sexual attraction for a guy until you get to know them. Did you say something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And is that how you still like kind of operate in dating and stuff?
That's why I can't do like online dating, because I just couldn't possibly like someone via their photo. Especially it's also quite grim, so it's like their photos aren't good anyways.
Yeah.
But
That's true.
But it definitely, like, anyone that I've dated, I never met them and was like, that's a hot guy. You know?
Okay.
I'm like, I don't know.
Well, I think why I notice that is because that's how I feel. And I had never heard really anyone else describe it that way.
Yeah.
But really, that I'm the same way with online dating. And I've always noticed, like, I definitely notice hot guys, but more so when I've fallen for a guy, it was part of their like personality that I really fell for, and usually in the past it was like they were being an asshole, and I was like, I like that guy.
Rhea, who's that? I think it's very common to like, even I go on online dating sites sometimes, and like people have like these physical requirements for dating, weird. Right? It's like they have to be a certain height, they have to look a certain way. Everything is physical, and like I don't really relate to that either, because like for me, I like to get to know people on a deeper level. I like to find out who they are as a person, what their personality is like. So for me, physical attributes are kind of like way down at the bottom of the list. And I wish that more people were like you and me and Rosa, because I think that it's like a little bit like shallow or whatever.
Well, it's also like, say we're all looking for the same thing. Say we want to like really fall in love and have like a long-term relationship. How different is that person going to look in 20 years? Yeah. Like I look different year to year. Like, of course, we all want to like maintain our vitality, but eventually you're going to age. You're going to look really different in whatever way that is. Your bodies change, your face changes, everything changes. So, having that like initial like physical attraction is so fleeting. It's like doesn't really make sense to me.
And I would much rather be treated with respect than care about, you know, how tall someone was or whatever, in my opinion.
Wow, Rhea, that was so powerful. You gotta put that on your Twitter. No, but actually it's so funny because that is such a powerful thing to say. But I don't know. I've never said that before. Out loud. I would rather be treated with respect than date a tall guy.
And I also, not only do I
say it with me now.
Also though, I also want to be seen in that light from a potential partner. Like I want a guy to not just see me as beautiful or having like a certain body. I want a guy to see that I'm treating him with respect, that I'm a respectful person, that I'm smart, or that, you know what I mean, so I think that's also how I want to be treated.
Yeah. Amazing. Oh, we're already getting so far. We're growing. Okay, well, what else did we want to talk about? We want to know your sign.
I'm a Virgo.
Okay, amazing.
Do you know your rising and your moon?
No, I don't even know what a Virgo is.
Oh like, my I don't God. Know. You're like Rosa.
Well, okay, so for me, I feel like a Virgo is somebody who definitely likes things a certain way. Like, perfect example, I'll always say this when I'm at work, because I'm a server. I'll be like, you can do it another way, but just know that that's the wrong way. But I'm also open to you doing it that way.
Oh, no.
So that's like the perfect example of my personality. Like, that's okay. I'm open to you being who you are, but my way is the better way.
Yeah. And I think the
Virgos are bossy.
And also, no, but the world needs Virgos, to be honest, because...
Thank you. Been trying to tell them.
Because like a Virgo is going to give you really good advice, and you might not want to hear it, honestly, right? And so some people might say that a Virgo is very hypercritical and that they're always like trying to nitpick all these things, but really their intentions are the purest. They just want everyone to be their very best selves. Yeah. And so I think some people take that the wrong way, but I think that we all need Virgos in our lives.
Yeah, but an evolved Virgo, like what I'm trying to become, would be like more so on the side of like allowing people to come to you for the advice instead of just like barfing out advice to everyone.
Yes, exactly. So people who actually appreciate your advice. And like, I also think that Virgos are very direct. Like the way that I laughed when you said you were a Virgo, because when you, on the show, you were calling that guy's behavior out. That was a very Virgo thing to do, because you're very strong, you know, and you want to say your opinion and how you feel. I think that's very respectable and very admirable, and I wish we could all be like that.
Yeah. I loved it, how it was like women on one side and very like united front, and then the men on the other side, and they were just all sweating.
Yeah, it was weird, like being in that environment. Like it felt like there was such like a wall of hostility. It was like
I could
palpable.
sense that too. Yeah.
That's why I was so uncomfortable when I was speaking. Like you could tell, like you'd hear it in my voice. I was like, ugh, because I'm just talking to this wall of like anger.
Yeah. And I was just like couldn't believe, like it was just such a clear, like the way that he took it was like, I feel like men in general, they just really cannot take accountability for almost anything. You know what I mean?
Like, I've really never closely known anyone quite like that. Like, most of my male friends are very open to listening to other people's perspectives.
Oh, really?
So that was really
That's
new
cool.
for me, and I think that's why I was like so outraged by so much of it, because it's so new. I mean, certainly in small doses, and then like you meet someone and you're like, they suck, and you think it's like a they suck thing, not like everyone kind of sucks a little bit. Like, it was like really magnified in this sort of setting.
Oh, interesting. Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that you have lots of open male friends. That's wonderful.
You're like, what's that
That
like?
gives us hope.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, because that's truly like what we want to see. Like, the more open that you can be and the more accountable that you can be is going to propel this civilization forward. Like, it'll, instead of dividing us, it'll unite us and create more room for good conversation and like the ability for us to like grow as human beings and not be so divided as like men and women.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's like, when there's a TV show where all these guys are sweating and all these intelligent women are sitting on the other side being like, this was not acceptable, the atmosphere that was created and the way that you treated us was not okay. Mm-hmm. And the guys are just like, I mean, I don't know, it wasn't enough. Whatever they were doing wasn't enough in that time.
Yeah. I mean, it was unfortunate because I think the biggest problem is that they're taking it so personally. Mm. I think they needed to be able to remove themselves from their behavior in a little bit. They're like, I'm not that person. I'm not this is why I did it. And that's like them just being super defensive and having like boxing gloves on. Mm-hmm. As soon as they hear any sort of criticism. And I'm like, I'm not saying that you're bad people. This is not a personal attack. I'm explaining how your behavior is so that you can do better in the future. Mm-hmm. And that's like, everyone does that. No one's born with like moral purity. Like, you have to be able to grow and learn and do better.
Yeah.
And you can't do that if you don't listen. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. Oh, I love it's so simple when you say it.
No, that's actually really amazing. I think you're so right. I think a lot of these situations, people get very defensive. And then they aren't receptive to like the learning and the growth that could happen, right?
Yeah, and it's such a bigger thing, especially that issue is so much bigger than just them.
Yeah.
And I think they weren't able to see past that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Interesting. And for some women, like, I know your colleague was kind of, I don't know if she was kind of saying, we just want to hear a sorry. I don't know if it was which guy she was talking to. Like, for some women, they want to hear a sorry.
Yeah.
Like, is that sorry important for you in your relationships with men? Or are you okay with, like, change behavior? Like, what would you really ultimately want?
Yeah, I'm not worried about apologies that much, because especially when they're sort of empty apologies, like, just to say that you're sorry really means nothing. And if the behavior continues, and then there was a lot of, like, contrasting things. They'd be like, I'm sorry I did this, but then they would say something else that sort of took away from that.
Right.
Or that...
And it was like, I'm sorry I did this, but
yeah,
you did this. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that sort of negates everything that they've just said.
Yeah.
And especially when you're pushing blame back onto the other person. It's not that I'm not trying to blame them. I don't need an apology. But when they've created this little, like, blame ping pong ball, I'm just going to tell you where it belongs. It's not me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I think, like, when I was watching it, I was like, the word gaslighting didn't get said, but that is what exactly you were describing. Mm. Like, it could happen to any gender, but, like, our experience as, like, women is men gaslighting us, like, for our normal emotional reaction to their, like, abuse, or their, like, say a man does something that's really wrong and not okay, and you go to them and say, you react, you're like, that was really hurtful, that was, like, really upsetting, I can't believe you treated me that way, and then all of a sudden they tell you all the reasons why it's your fault that you got treated that way. So that would be, like, that's gaslighting.
Or not even that it's your fault, also just that you're overreacting and that your reaction isn't valid.
Exactly.
And it's like, it's mine, so yeah, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And, like, we've done, like, a YouTube video about gaslighting. It was really quick, though, and I think, like, there's so much more to it. But it's also very simple. It's, like, it's psychological abuse to try and get out of the hot water that you're in and convince the other person that they're crazy. And I would say that every single woman has experienced this.
Yeah, and I mean, it happens in the workplace too, especially if you're working with men or you're working in an environment, you know. I think that you can get gaslit at work. But I think we experience all the time. And then I think you had an analogy. It's like when there's like a little fire burning, right? And then you create this bonfire in the background to distract from it.
Yes, rather all than addressing. Of a sudden, you have to like go and put that fire out.
Exactly.
Right? It's like I'm coming to you with this little fire where I'm like, hey, like that really was upsetting and hurtful or whatever. Or, like my reaction to something really like getting cheated on or getting whatever it may be. And then it's like this, they create this whole other big problem that everyone has to rush to. And then you're the one saying sorry all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Not cool.
Yeah. And I really liked how, like, on that show, how you addressed it. Because on that episode, I should say, you kind of, in a, you know, very calm way, you said, I'm not going to sort of co-sign this behavior. Like, I don't really want to be a part of this, and I'm taking a step back. And I think as women, like, it's one thing to recognize when you're being gaslit or when these things are happening, but it's like, how do you address it? You know what I mean? Like, how do you actually bring it up? And I thought you did it in a really classy, mature way. You know.
Well, yeah, we're always looking for these examples.
Yes, examples.
Because when it's in the moment, it could be with someone that you really love, and then all of a sudden you're panicking because you're like, well, this is bad. How do I make it better? And if you can just say, what would Courtney do?
I don't know if I'd recommend that.
Well, Courtney would say, I'm not co-signing this behavior.
Yeah. I love that.
And I'm going to step away. Because this seems to be your problem now.
Yeah.
But the biggest reason that I said that and that I was so vocal about the behavior, especially watching it back, it's very rare that you have a situation where you are in an argument with a friend or a partner, anything like that, and then you get to watch it back. Like, you have your own feelings and then you see a live replay of it. Like, it really doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. And it sort of validates your feelings because at the time it can be confusing, especially when someone's pushing back and saying that you're the one who's doing wrong, and then you watch it back and you're like, that was definitely not me, and I regret apologizing for that.
And especially like in a boat, other people are getting involved too. And they're like, well, why are you crying? Like, why are you like bringing all this? Like, well, I don't even understand. Like, and you'll that little doubt in your mind will be like, because I've experienced this too. Like, all of a sudden you get other people's opinions and you're like, oh, I should just squash this and say sorry.
I also love to apologize. I love to do it.
Even like, when you don't mean it?
No, I always mean it. That's my problem. Okay. Like, I'm very receptive to how my actions affect other people. Like, I'm always listening for that. So I'm very, like, I mean, in every argument or anything, there's really two sides, you know? So I'm very open to showing what my side of the issue was. But I think in this, like, it was not me. And I regret, I regret like accepting that blame in the way that I did.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect example of how people do feel when they're in, like they really like somebody, or they're in a relationship, or you have a crush and they're starting to act in a way that could be a little bit abusive, and you're just like, your brain will do everything to convince you that you can fix it in a way. And if an apology is all it takes, then sometimes you'll end up getting into that cycle where you're apologizing. But you have to recognize that as gaslighting. You have to. You have to.
But
like,
it's so hard when you're like in the middle.
I know.
It's
so hard.
Yeah, but
it's
having
hard.
these conversations, I think, and seeing it on TV is such a great step towards all of us being able to recognize it. And it happens to men too. Like, this is our experience, so we talk from our perspective, but it happens to everybody. And it's such an important thing to recognize and say, I don't want to be part of this behavior because my feelings are valid, and what you're doing is psychological abuse.
Yeah, totally. And I think that...
And keep it short. And then you can detach, walk away, whatever.
I think honestly saying, listen, I'm not even going to talk to you anymore. right, is really, that's what I've had to get, the stage that I've had to get to, because you'll have the same people gaslight you over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And then the only way, and you can be like, oh, you're gaslighting me, and this is what you're doing, and all day long, and they'll still do that behavior.
And they're like, no, I'm not. You're crazy.
You're like replaying every freaking relationship I ever had.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I like to like logically explain the behavior rather than using like buzzwords sort of, because that's so easy to dismiss.
Right.
And that's what they'll come back at you with, is like, you're dramatic, you're crazy, you're too sensitive, like all of these words. But if you explain logically why it is that without really saying the word, then it usually has more effect, but not in this case.
Yeah. And that's interesting that you brought that up, because we talk about that a lot, because like there's like a lot of words that people are very adverse to, and gaslighting is probably one of them.
Totally. And you got to rebrand it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, or not say it at all.
Or not even say the word. Just say, this is what you're doing right now.
But it's also it's just not even expanding your thoughts. It's like, why? Why are you doing that? How are you doing that? So just explaining that behavior in a more accessible way, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, the other thing that strikes me when we're talking right now is that you are a type of person that really looks at your own actions and your own behaviors and says to yourself, what can I do to make it better? How can I improve my relationships? How can I improve my communication? And it's unfortunate, but like, I just feel like that is such, like, women are so good at that. And men are like so terrible. Like, I'm just wondering if this guy ever watched the show and thought, gee, like, could I have done that any differently?
Right?
Do you know what I mean? Could I have improved
instead of just
my behavior?
placing the blame elsewhere.
You know?
I don't know.
So it's just like very interesting to me.
I think it must just be like an ego thing or a insecurity thing. I think women are much more willing to be vulnerable, and that's sort of what that is looking at your own behavior and not being afraid to say, like, I did something wrong.
Right.
And men are less likely to, I think they feel like weak for doing that.
Yeah, and like we've had personal discussions about this, and one of the reasons why women feel more comfortable being vulnerable is because we are vulnerable every day. Like, we are in physical vulnerability on a daily basis. Like, whether everyone's different, but whether it's a little bit on your mind or just in the very back of your mind, like, women are afraid of being murdered. Like, it happens all the time, right? So, especially in this, like, very popular age of, like, true crime, it's on our minds. And
I cannot watch those.
Don't watch
I literally can't. I like lock my window. I only live on the second floor. Like, it's not far enough.
Yeah. But it, like, even now more than ever, it's on my mind that I could get murdered. I'm a woman. I'm smaller. It's just, so we are in that very basic way more vulnerable than men. And so we have it kind of built in already as a practice. And I think that we don't hold men to an accountability to be vulnerable the way that we are. And then they aren't.
Yeah. But that's also like a product of society too. Like, everyone teaches men that they can't be that way in a large part. So it's, like, you know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And not that I don't understand, but like, it sucks.
No, it's absolutely part of it. Like, they have to be strong and sporty and the best. What else do men have to do? I don't know. Sounds really tough.
Strong and sporty and the best.
Oh my God.
Don't we all feel that way?
Okay, what else do we want to talk about? Your love language. We talk about love languages a lot. So we wanted to know, like, it sounds like you're a very considerate person and very loving, to be honest. But what's your love language that you like to receive?
All of them, unfortunately. All of them. What are they? Except for gifts is like the least important, probably.
Yeah, so we'll just say them quickly. It's gifts, acts of service, quality time, physical touch, words of affirmation. Did I miss any?
You did that so well.
I know, it's been like...
I was like, I hope she doesn't miss one, because I can't think of it right now.
So go ahead.
I feel like quality time is an important one for me. Acts of service, physical touch, and then probably words of affirmation and gifts are the least important to me.
Oh, interesting.
Although... yeah, it depends. I mean, if you're getting all of the other ones, you can't have them all. Really.
Yeah. And what do you like to give to your partner?
Hard to say. I'm very affectionate, probably to, like, it annoys them more than anything, so that's not something that I'm giving to their benefit.
Yeah, well, affectionate, like with like physical touch kind of thing. Yeah.
So probably acts of service. I like doing nice things. I'm really big into cooking, so that's like my biggest love language.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Mine is I really need words of affirmation.
Yeah.
I need it.
And what do you like to give?
I like to give acts of service, and gifts. That's like my 2 top ones. But I really have to dial it back with the gifts. No, like honestly, back in the day, like I used to date a lot more because I had like way lower standards, and I would just really just date whoever I had a crush on, and I would want to immediately. My brain would start going like, what can I give them as a gift? Like this, I dated this farmer.
I'm so bad at gift giving. I'm so jealous that you have this talent.
Oh, well, yeah, you
so
understand
thoughtful.
that you are the gift, and she needs to learn that.
It's true.
You're like, I wrapped myself in a bow. You're welcome. No, I would, like, I've dated this farmer. I'm like, should I get him a custom knife so he can whittle? Like, I was anything. And I didn't, luckily, give him that gift because he wasn't even that into me. But I noticed, and thankfully I'm more mindful of it now, but I love to think of romantic, like, gifts to give. I'm very into that. And I think that until you're really in a strong foundation of a relationship, a woman giving a man a gift is like, to me, it doesn't set people up for success in like a heterosexual monogamous relationship. I just think the balance for me would be very off. And if I'm giving too much of myself and I'm also giving gifts, it never ends up working out. But Rhea loves gifts.
Yeah, mine is gifts. I love to receive gifts, and I love to give. I don't even know what I like to give anymore.
You do acts of service.
Acts of service.
Yeah.
I like to say physical touch, but it's actually acts of service.
Yeah. She's like so domestic, like in an actual relationship. Well, she's domestic, like everything's always like very clean here, but you're always doing the absolute most for your
Yeah,
man.
that's right. That's why I can't be married, because unless I'm getting like a lot of money.
Yeah. Like you'll work 18 hours a day for free.
That's right.
Yeah. And it's like, go to bed. And you're like, I'm just going to clean this one more thing. I love you. I can see it now. Yeah, you got to be very careful.
Again, women in general, they give so much in relationships, and I think you kind of touched on it, like emotional labor. Like the emotional labor even in itself that we do every day for all the men in our lives is incredible. So we just have to be really cognizant all the time.
I mentioned that I used to date a lot more. Like ever since I raised my standards for how men treat me, like I almost date not at all now. And that's kind of like a Vancouver thing. I feel like I think we live in such a small town that everyone ends up kind of being the same. Like I feel like I could just go on the same date over and over, and the guy would just be different. And where I work is all dates, and I just see these dates happening, and it doesn't even make me want to date because of like I don't know, I've just grown to know what to expect, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And it's not very exciting to try and date in Vancouver.
Yeah. Have you dated in Vancouver at all?
Yeah. Unfortunately,
truly like no good experiences.
Really?
Yeah. And then I moved to France for business school in 2016, I want to say. And that was like the first time people were like, where's Courtney? Like my friend that I met there, she was like, everyone's asking me about you. Like, you're pretty. I was like, what? Like, people want to take me on dates? Like, what is going on?
Interesting.
Like, I'm so used to being around assholes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like in Vancouver, men are just like, oh, what's the next one coming around the corner? Like,
yeah,
we're a dime a dozen, pretty women who give and give and give. So it's like, why settle for only one?
Yeah, I think like a big part of the problem in Vancouver as well, and that's also why I'm so outspoken about behavior that I don't agree with, is because if you do that in Vancouver, I think with a lot of men, like they do something that you don't like, and then you speak about it, they're like, well, I got another one that'll put up with it.
Yeah, totally.
Like, there's like 5 more over here that won't say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get to just keep doing this behavior.
Yeah, and I think that's very counterintuitive to then talk outspokenly about it. But what my experience has been having this podcast is like, women will come up to me in Vancouver and say, like, I love your message and I think it's really empowering. And the more that we can like spread that, like we can say, I don't agree with your behavior, right?
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Right? Because those other 5 women, they're just on their own journey on raising their standards. But we all have to go through a couple of these these butt heads and ding dongs.
Exactly.
Well, you know, it's hard because, I mean, it's easy for you guys because you're Virgos. I'm a Pisces. And it's a lot harder for me to, like, have these firm boundaries because that's what we're talking about is boundaries. And, like, it's taken me a very long time to, and I can't explain it, why it takes some people longer than others to be able to say to a man, yeah, sorry, your behavior doesn't work for me. You know what I mean? Even an adult woman like myself, right? So it's like, I think that it's so important to see these examples. Like, I know Rosa, her whole life, she's always been pretty good at speaking her mind.
Yeah.
Courtney, you are incredible, the way that you spoke to that man. And we need to see these examples all the time. There's like this representation of women upholding their boundaries. So then we can sort of like mimic it.
Yeah. But that's the exact thing is like, we've talked about in the podcast before, if to like live your best life, you have to align your beliefs with your actions. And I believe that I should be treated really well. And that's my number one priority. But there are like consequences to that. So for example, like I have not been dating for like almost 2 years because guys are just getting in their own way. Like I'm sorry, I have these standards. This is how I want to be treated. Like, of course, if I get asked out, I'll go on a date. But then if you cross my boundaries, I will break up with you. I'm like the queen of it. If anyone needs help breaking up, just DM me.
Yeah, that's right. Actually,
so
seriously.
good at it.
And also for any kind of messaging whatsoever.
Oh yeah, just send me a DM. I got you.
That's like really good that you're able to do that. But like the men, I think it's better. The message I'd like to tell women is like it's much better to be single and happy than be with a man who doesn't value you. You know what I mean? And it doesn't listen to your boundaries or whatever. And we talk a lot about this sense of value. I mean, I can tell that you value yourself. So how do you feel about your self-worth? Like, have you always felt really good about yourself and, like, known that you had, like, this high value? Or is it something that you've had to work on?
I don't really know, to be honest. Like, I think people are always, like, messaging me saying, like, how good of a job my parents did. And I'm sure it's partially that. It's, like, the environment that you grow up in. But it's also just, like, a willingness. Because I think I've always focused on other attributes that I have other than the way that I look. And I think that's always been my biggest value. So I'm always surprised when I'm, like, on a date with someone and I realize they're not listening to anything that I'm saying. Because I think I'm, like, regaling them with, like, all of this insight. And then I'm like, oh... You're looking at my boobs.
Yeah.
So it's still like a surprise to me. So I think I like maybe have like an inflated sense of my personality. Like that's what my parents gave me.
Yeah, and maybe that's what like starting to like look at your own value is to go inwards and look at what you can like improve and grow on, right? Because again, what we were saying before is like the way you look is always going to be changing. It could get better or worse or whatever, but you could improve your personality every day, right? Like,
oh yeah. And then I know exactly what you're talking about when you're on a date with a guy and you're having like this, trying to talk about something really smart.
Yeah.
And you just realize that like he is like on like this other planet.
Truly, he like cuts you off mid-sentence with like something irrelevant. You're like, what?
Yeah, and it's devastating.
Truly.
Right? It's very devastating. But at the end of the day, it's like you just have to be like, you know what? I'd rather just be alone, be by myself, not go on any dates until someone's going to appreciate me for the things that I want to be appreciated for.
Yeah.
I.e. my intelligence or whatever.
But it's hard to have someone to sit in front of someone and have them like devalue you in that way because you're walking around like thinking that you're not that way.
Yeah.
And then they're like, just kidding. You only matter based on the way that you look.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
yeah.
cool.
yeah, absolutely. Now I don't want to go on any date. I really go up and down with this.
We talk a lot about like sex, love, and relationships, and like we were kind of having the discussion earlier about like orgasm. So I kind of want to bring that up just like very briefly. Like, what do you think about women faking orgasms?
Very opposed to that.
Oh,
but that's in the same thing as just like not speaking about how you feel or about how someone makes you feel. Like you're not being truthful.
Right.
There's no point. I just go into relationships with men being exactly who I am and being very open about that because that's who they're going to get eventually. So I might as well not start off with a bunch of lies. And that sort of filters into every aspect of your relationship, including sex.
So, that's good. That's
yeah.
good advice.
Again, so simple and yeah, so smart. I really struggle with that even now, even after giving all this advice about how to have great communication during sex and like not to ever fake an orgasm and all that, I still get so shy to talk about or to just even be myself in the bedroom. And I think just thinking about it, like eventually they're gonna get to know the real you. So may as well show up that way the first time, because that way you're not going to be wasting any time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're with the right person, that's what you want in a relationship, you know?
Yeah.
Someone that you can talk to.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it starts like there too, because like I think in my own experience anyways, and I still do this, I do not know why, but I still do this today. Like a guy will just do like the very bare minimum in the bedroom, and I'll like make it seem like he's doing a better job than he is. Like I might not be faking the orgasm, but I'll be like giving signs that it's like so awesome when it's just like okay.
Not, yeah.
And but that also goes back to like the boundary thing. So like when you aren't upfront and direct, like when a guy is kind of pushes your boundaries even like in a communication way and you don't say anything about it, it kind of like sets a precedent, right, in the relationship.
And then if you bring it up later, it's confusing for them.
Yeah, exactly.
And the last thing we want to do is confuse a man.
Yeah. They're confused enough. It's actually true though.
Oh, man.
Poor things.
I know.
No, but that's actually true as far as like having morals. You don't want to go into, wouldn't want someone to come to me and me to feel confused and be like, wait a minute, we've been doing it a certain way, whether it's communicating or having sex or whatever it is, and all of a sudden you tell me this whole time you haven't liked it that way. That is confusing because, you might take that to heart. And you would be like, why would you waste your time? Or why would you waste our time or mine doing it that way? So you can sort of apply that to whatever it may be in the bedroom, in life and communication. Down the road, if you really say how you feel, will they be confused or will they be totally aligned because you've been sort of saying it the whole time? And if you could say to yourself, oh, I think they might be confused if I said how I really feel, then that sounds like it's time for a conversation right away.
Yeah. It sounds like I have to have a lot of conversations. Oh my gosh. In this
They're like, holy.
like, whoa. Whoa. No, but it's, it's like very interesting to me. And then I think to myself, why do I do that? Like, why as a woman do I, and I'm sure other women can relate to this, you Virgos can. Why do I try and sugarcoat things? Why do I have such a hard time being so direct?
There's a naked man right there.
Shut the fuck up. Oh my god. Shut up. I'm usually the naked person. Right in the corner suite. The corner suite.
Why is he unpacking boxes completely naked in the window?
Oh my god. Classic.
Okay, I've been here a lot of times. I've never seen a naked man.
You came to this video. I've lived here for years.
Wow. Okay.
Where'd you go?
It's the middle of the day.
Oh man. Usually I'm the person unpacking boxes naked.
So funny.
Wow.
That
Okay.
is- wow.
Men don't usually, was that a man? They don't usually walk around without like boxers on at least.
I know.
It's very
Oh
strange.
my god.
Good eye.
Good eye. Yeah, great.
I'm surprised you recognized a man's butt.
Oh my god. Oh man. I feel like you were saying something so intelligent too, and this naked man just ruined it.
I was just wondering why it's such a struggle for me. Like, it's like a pick me thing a little bit.
Right.
It's this thing where like, oh, if I make it seem like we're having so much pleasure and I'm so easy-going and I don't bring things up, that he's gonna like me more and want to be with me more. You know what I mean? And I feel like if I say anything negative or I tell him to do something differently in the bedroom, that he's gonna be put off.
Right.
You know?
But if that's what you were saying, it's like counterintuitive.
It's counterintuitive.
Because then they're not actually getting to know you at all.
Exactly.
Right?
And also, if you're not finding out that you can't tell them negative things or like have any disagreements, then like you're with an asshole. So you need to know that.
Wow, that's the tip of the day. I'm with a lot of assholes.
That is the tip of the day. Okay, so if you can't have those tough conversations, or you might be too scared, if you're finding that you are sugarcoating things, it might be because you're with an asshole.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also women, I think, are especially, they really like to accommodate other people. So even I do that a lot, just in my daily life. And it causes me, I think, a lot of anxiety trying to bend myself backwards to make other people's lives easier. Like, even when I'm on a plane, if I'm in the window seat, I will not get up. I will, like, pee my pants before I move the aisle person.
Totally.
Classic.
You know, it's in our biology to accommodate men, right?
Yeah.
Like, literally to procreate, we have to accommodate a man inside of us. And so don't forget, it's like, it's not your fault, and it's okay as long as you're mindful of this. My practice lately is I will not get out of the way. If I'm in the grocery store, elbows out. Like, if a guy bumps into me, that is his fault. I'm not stepping out of the way.
My cousin recently, she did like a test when she was in Vancouver, because I think even walking down the street, women always move out of the way.
Yeah.
And men will just walk in a straight line. And she's like, I stopped moving, and do you know how many, like, hundreds of people bumped into her that day?
Yeah.
She just didn't move for them, and neither did they, because they're so unused to it.
Yeah, and it's such an incredible, you can go and do this yourself in the grocery store today or on the sidewalk.
Or go in the gym. For me, it's always the gym. Like, the men
yeah.
take up so much space. They take up the whole gym, just with their energy. And it's just like one person.
Is there any room in here for me? Like, no, you need to go into this special room for women
right.
where we all accommodate each other.
Exactly. A tiniest little space. The women's gym in my gym is the size of this room that we're in. It's
and it's like,
tiny.
I'm sorry, is it only 10% women that belong to this gym?
Yeah, exactly.
It's wild.
Wow. Having a lot of epiphanies today.
I know. This is a really good one.
After this?
I'm gonna go talk to the gym manager.
That should be the men's only room.
That's right.
And the women get the rest. I see just as many women in there.
I know. It's wild.
But yeah, I think that's something when any men who are listening, when they get a little bit confused as to like women explaining what it's like to be a woman, I think that is a great experiment for you as a man to take on, is why don't you start getting out of the way? Or just be mindful of whether or not you do that in everyday life, on the sidewalk, in the gym. Like, how much space are you taking up? Is it more than your physical body? Maybe that's something that you can start changing and understanding. That's how women move around in the world every day.
Or could you move out of the way and allow someone else to be in that space? If we want to get really deep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What a great question.
Like, could I sit down and maybe let another person stand up for once?
Yeah. Or vice versa.
Yeah, or vice versa. Yeah, no, that's very interesting.
I just have like a couple like boat questions about like below deck. Okay. Like, it sounds like you already were on some boats and stuff. Did you like grow up boating? Or
I grew up boating in Vancouver, but like
Okay.
on small boats, not anything like this.
so when you started on big motor yachts, did you get seasick?
No.
What?
I'd worked on only one other yacht prior to below deck, and that was when I lived in France, and that one was only 108 feet, and it did mostly day charters, so we weren't doing anything crazy. It was like going to Saint-Tropez from like in the south of France. We weren't doing in any like big waters. And then
that sounds really nice.
It really isn't.
No?
No.
Oh. Wow, it's incredible how I can sound so incredible. So
well,
amazing.
you're working like 16 hours a day, so you're not like, it's not fun.
You don't even get like a moment to look out and be like, wow.
When I was on below deck, I saw the sunset for the first time on the last charter, because those guests were like so easygoing. Like I would go check on them and they would be like sleeping on the sun deck. Like they didn't need anything. It was like the first time I'd seen a guest anywhere on the boat and they asked for nothing.
Oh,
wow. Okay, so they're quite demanding.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of service that you have to do.
Yeah.
But you don't get seasick.
No, and then that boat was a bit bigger, so it had stabilizers, and we're also not going very far.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you're more likely to get seasick on a smaller boat that doesn't have all the equipment.
Oh, interesting. I was always so curious about that. Because, of
And
course, when I started watching it, I was like, I have to go do this. Like, I think I'm too old now, but I'm a little washed up. No, you have to be, like, quite young and, like, very thin. And, like, it's, like, you have to be, like, very... It's fine. I missed my chance. But
no, but I want to be a client.
We're gonna be the client,
right? Don't you want to be the client?
Charter guest.
I wouldn't even want it. Like, if I were on a boat, I wouldn't want people serving me. Like, they would be in my way.
I know. It's like, why are you hitting my face again?
Yeah, like, right? Exactly. I'm like, yo, go away.
Yeah.
Your skirt is not cute. I don't like being around polyester. And like, I can pour my own wine.
Yeah. Right. I was just thinking that. It's like,
can
I have more wine? You're like, well, I could also just pour it in. Interesting. So you're just like, it's like a 24/7. You're just getting service. That's what you're kind of paying for.
Yeah.
Just to do absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions about boats?
Well, do you I don't know if this is do you ever get to know the production crew? Like, are you like chit-chatting with them too? Like,
you're not allowed to. They have what's called
really?
a fourth wall, so you're like not even really supposed to. I mean, you can't talk to them or address them really.
You can't. That's so
but then
interesting.
you're filming the interview, so you're talking to them at that point. So you're like seeing them around the boat. Like,
oh, okay. Cool.
And like you want to talk to them, but you can't.
You can't.
And even the cameramen, it's weird because they'll be like a few feet away from you, and you are around them every single day, so you get like a physical familiarity with them, so you feel like you know them, but you have not spoken. So at the end of 6 weeks, we like finished filming, and all the cameramen had their cameras down, and they're like sitting in the main salon with us, and it was like, this is so weird. I'm talking to you for the first time, and we spent every day together for 6 weeks, basically.
Wow.
Because
and
whenever
you've been
you're
watching me every day for 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
So at any time the filming is happening, you cannot speak, and you're always being filmed at all time.
Did you feel like you had no privacy?
You sort of forget that the cameras are there. Although there's like wall-mounted cameras, and you're just very tired, so you're really not aware of anything happening outside your tiny little orbit. So
interesting. Love it.
Cool.
I think it's such a great show. I don't know, it's just so, I love it. I've watched so many different seasons.
And the other thing I wanted to ask, like, in the yachting industry, is it like it doesn't seem like it's necessarily male dominated, because what I've seen from Below Deck is like there's lots of women. But what is like the dynamic like as far as like, do the men seem to be more in charge? Do they have this like aura of, or is it kind of more equal as far as like the outside crew and the inside crew?
I don't know. I mean, there's certainly more male captains than there are female captains. And they're the ones who are like very much in charge. And then on larger boats, like when you get up to like 60 meters or much bigger than that, you'll have sometimes a purser who's like a head manager of the entire boat, and that's generally a woman, because they will have worked themselves up from like being a stewardess, and then they would be a chief stew, and then you would go to a purser.
Okay.
And there certainly are male stewards as well, but it's just less. So that's sort of the major management position on a boat.
So sometimes the captain usually man, but purser usually a woman.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
It was just such a pleasure for our first guest to have you. You're so intelligent, and I'm going to listen back to this, to all your amazing advice. I'm just going to be like, okay, when I need something concise about what's going on, I'm going to listen back to this. And
yeah, absolutely. It was so inspiring. And if you want to follow Courtney on Twitter and Instagram, you will be entertained.
Yeah, actually, great social media.
Yeah, great social media.
Yeah, very entertaining.
Love it.
Do my best.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This has been Hard to Swallow with Rosa and Rhea.